I'm Owen Keenan. I'm illustrator of Lom The Last and Brute, and this is the True North Country Comics podcast.
Welcome to the True North Country Comics podcast, dedicated to celebrate Canadian comic book and graphic novel creators and supporters. I'm John Swinimer. On this episode, I chat with Owen Keenan about his comic book series Lom The Last from Preston Squire Publishing. Based in Toronto, Ontario, Owen Keenan is a comic book illustrator and sometimes musician. Along with writer Preston Squire, Owen created Brute for ESQ Comics. His most recent project is Lom The Last, written by Preston Squire. Lom The Last is about the world's last Neanderthal. Forced out of his ancestral home, the world's last Neanderthal strives to find a new life in a strange world. Surrounded by unfamiliar beasts and plants, can he learn to survive in this harsh new world? And will the locals tolerate this new threat to their way of life? So, without further ado, here's my chat with Owen Keenan about his comic book series Lom The Last from Preston Squire Publishing. So, Owen Keenan, thank you very much for taking time to chat with me.
Thank you.
I appreciate your time. Before I get going with all the questions, I would like to know, what was the first comic book that you read?
First comic book I read was probably Kong the Untamed #1, which is DC Comics. And it was a caveman comic. It had a really great Bernie Wrightson cover, Alcala art on the inside.
Wow.
That's yeah, it's a really good comic. I read that when I looked at the pictures when I was a kid.
Yeah.
It's a two-part answer, though, because the first comic that really knocked me out and that I read and understood was X-Men 141.
All right.
Yeah, so that kind of sealed the deal for me taking comics seriously. Not that I didn't take them seriously, but that it was like there was something else going on here.
Exactly. Good stuff growing up, but I'm wondering, who or what inspires you to create today?
You know, it's going to sound like a cheesy answer, but I really like Preston's writing. He's an old friend of mine, and I always loved his writing and the ideas that he comes up with. So what he writes inspires my art.
And speaking of writing, we're talking about your latest project, Lom The Last, and he's a writer on the project. But if you could talk a little bit about the story, what is Lom The Last all about?
So Lom The Last is a caveman comic, but it's alternate Earth. And it touches on a bunch of sort of esoteric themes that have interested me over the years, some of them factual and some of them not factual. Basically, it tells the story of the last Neanderthal on Earth and his pet mammoth. This character, his name is Lom. He's about 15 years old. He's a teenager. He ends up in Africa, and he meets very early Homo sapiens. It's a whole new world for him. In the comic, he doesn't, he's not from a culture that knows farming or animal husbandry, and he's actually mute. He doesn't speak. He communicates telepathically, and he's able to communicate with his mammoth, with Kaja, and he's also able to, kind of touching on X-Men mutant themes, he's able to convince, form of hypnotism, he's able to convince people that they can't see him. So he can disappear at will. So basically, it's a story of the people he encounters in Africa, and they're teenagers like himself. And obviously, there's a huge culture shock, to say the least, between the two groups. And it's a story about his new life with his new friends. We're just getting started with it. We're on issue #2 right now. Issue 1 came out roughly this time last year. About halfway through the inks and the pencils, actually, for issue #2.
I'm going to ask you then, is there a message that the series is trying to convey to readers with this juxtaposition of someone from a prior generation or prior time to a more modern time?
So, yeah, that's definitely a big part of it, is just that theme. But I mean, really, it's a story of acceptance, and it's a story of overlooking differences, finding commonalities. Lom is a very trusting person, but he's different. He's not Homo sapiens. He does things differently. He thinks differently. there's a lot of interesting things that happen. I'm not going to say that he's a perfect person or anything like that, but he does approach life differently, for better or for worse. But he learns a lot from his new friends. In turn, they learn a lot from him.
What about the audience for your book? I mean, typically critics will say that you have to create for yourself, but ultimately,
Yes.
Who are you creating this for?
When Preston and I worked on Brute, which is the other ongoing series that we do, we decided that there was a gap for comics for younger readers. Comics that we grew up with. Like I said earlier, X-Men 141 wasn't necessarily aimed at adults. I mean, I was able to buy it for 50 cents from my local variety store and discovered a whole world of sophisticated writing. So they're aimed at younger readers. And I know there's the market that, as we grew up with, has vanished. But nonetheless, we're making these comics for younger people, so there's nothing untoward. There's no foul language, nothing too crazy in the comics. It's
Right.
sort of, there's an imaginary comics code authority that we're operating under. Yeah.
Sure. Now, you hinted before, touched upon using inks for creating art. So I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the tools used to create art and the process you and Preston came up with to create the comic book.
That's been an evolution. When we first started doing Brute, it was all digital because I was sort of, starting from scratch. I just got a Wacom pad and a laptop, and it was all new to me. I mean, the only sort of help I had was my art schooling with doing blind contours, because the Wacom pad, you're sort of drawing on a pad and looking at a screen, which is different from looking at your pencil or pen making a line. For me, it was a real learning curve. I eventually came around to doing things in an old-fashioned way, going back to actual pencils and paper, scanning those, and then doing digital inks, the Wacom pad, which is quite versatile. And then when we came around to doing Lom The Last #1, I went completely in reverse and did everything analog. So, pencils and paper, and then inks onto paper, and then scanning those. Even the text was handwritten. It was neat to do it that way, but now I've sort of split the difference, and I'm doing it, this current issue, it's physical pencils and digital inks and digital text, which I think, because I'm kind of a slow worker anyway, it at least speeds things up a bit. And I have gotten the feel for, using the tablet now. So I kind of enjoy playing with line and enjoying what the digital inks can do. One thing that I really noticed was, the end result is quite similar to how the all analog one was. So I think it's my preferred way of doing it is half and half analog, half digital.
Right. Now, did you work from a script that Preston provided to you, or did you both sort of go back and forth sharing ideas?
The way that we evolved was, and again, I had no idea how others did it. So when Preston gave me his scripts early on, I went about changing them without asking him, which annoyed him to no end. And then I saw the light and realized, no, I'm doing things completely wrong. I should just follow his writing. And basically, there's a mutual respect. I try to follow his writing as close to the letter as I can, unless there's something impossible, unless there's like a character that just, I can't fit him in the panel that, the way Preston wants, then I'll give him a phone call and we'll try to figure something out. But no, Preston pretty much calls the shots with, how the panels, what happens in the panels, but I'm given a free rein with the layouts. So,
Right.
I do the layouts and there's a little bit of give and take, but usually Preston gives me a pretty good script and I'm able to work without too many questions.
Now, I wanted to ask you about your next project. I presume that Lom The Last is going to continue for a bit, but what are you working on right now?
So I'm working on Lom The Last second issue. Yeah, that's definitely going to be my focus for a while because there's a lot coming up. I was just going through my folder here in my portfolio. Yeah, I've definitely got my work cut out for me. I mean, Preston's written me, pretty much the next whole issue and some stuff beyond. So he'll occasionally surprise me with a request for, he likes to do parody ads, like in the old comics, there was like Sea Monkeys or, Charles Atlas ads, that kind of thing. He'll occasionally ask me to do something like that and he'll work it into one of the Brute comics or, something else that we're doing. So, The short answer is, yeah, I'm working on Lom, but Preston will surprise me with a request here and there for something else.
Right. Now, do you have any time away from the studio to promote your book, maybe at a festival or a convention or anything?
We do that. Preston does that a lot more than I do. He's the owner of our imprint, of ESQ Comics. He's the one who sort of heads out to conventions more often than not. I have accompanied him a couple times. We did Fan Expo and Comic Con. They're great things to do. So we enjoy doing that. That's kind of what we, especially this time of year, I love it when either he or on the rare occasion that I can come out that we do that because it's great fun.
Sure. Well, with everything that you have going on, where do you recommend that people go online to find out about your current and your future plans?
The best place to do that is our website, the ESQ Comics website, which is www.esqcomics.com. And if you want to read about Lom The Last, it's /LOM.
Well, Owen, those are all the questions I have for you, but I'm wondering, is there something I didn't ask that you'd like to get across in this interview?
I did want to mention, because some people have wondered where the word Lom comes from. It's a play on words. It's basically just a phonetic version of French l'homme, which translates as the man, but it also could mean more broadly humanity. So, that's where the LOM comes from. It's just, kind of a play. And throughout the comic, there's little things like that, like his mammoth friend Kaja is so named because the Sanskrit word for elephant is Gaja. So it kind of just wanted to get a word that was kind of close, play around a little bit with some of the themes with this book. I thought I'd mention that because some people have asked, well, why Lom? And that's where that comes from.
Thanks to Owen for the chat. You can discover more about Owen Keenan on Instagram at owen.keenan.94. You can discover more about Lom The Last at esqcomics.com. And thank you for tuning in to the True North Country Comics podcast. I invite you to visit the True North Country Comics website to listen to even more conversations with creators about making comic books and graphic novels. You can follow along True North Country Comics on most social media platforms. And you can send any and all feedback to John at truenorthcountrycomics.com. Thanks for tuning in, and come back soon for another episode. Bye for now. True North Country Comics Podcast is copyright True North Country Comics, copyright 2026.